today we're going to talk about negotiation and closing techniques. And this is, I want this to be somewhat interactive and hear some of your experiences as well of things that you have are challenged with or feel apprehension about, or where you're seeing potentially some block or challenge in feeling comfortable in the negotiation process. I've got some highlights here, but I really want to allow this to become some places where we're sharing and being honest about places where we feel potentially some discomfort in that area. So there's a lot of areas in which we're experiencing and utilizing negotiation and closing techniques. And a highlight, I would say, of those is some of these stages, right? Prospecting, meetings, presenting services. The retainer fee, I know for a lot of people, can be one of challenge. Marketing money, sometimes if you're working with a developer, or who's going to pay for staging, potentially like qualifying buyers and deciding who you're going to work with, and then of course closing the deal and seeing potentially those buying characteristics that someone's ready to make that commitment. So I'd like to hear a little bit from you all of areas where you feel that you've had some challenge, or you would like to improve your ability to negotiate through those stages. Anybody?
Thank you.
Okay.
It's like new construction seems like there's not a lot of levers negotiating.
Right. Okay. Right. Builder contract, it is what it is. Press hardware copies yours. Yeah.
Negotiating with open door / corporate east rather than an individual agent.
Okay.
I think one of my issues is put in the position to feel like I have to outplay another realtor competing for the same listing.
Competing for the same listing?
Yeah, suddenly, like if I'm just a listing appointment, everything's great, but then suddenly the psychology of knowing that for sure, like I meet with this other person, that kind of changes, and I have trouble, like, staying in my path, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yep, competing with other agents, specifically listings, and when you find out about that process can certainly be, can create some certain anxiety and nerves. Yeah.
Pre-market or day one?
Pre-market or what?
Or day one. Like right when it goes live.
What do you mean by that?
Like if you show, like for instance, last week I showed up at home on Thursday and it went live Thursday, and when I called to make an offer, it was pretty much like this is what it takes. I mean, it just felt like, yeah.
You had no negotiation.
I had no leverage.
Right. What do we do with that? Okay. Anybody else?
Multiple offers.
Multiple offers. Okay. Yes.
I don't know what you really call it, but it's when it goes live, but we won't do any showings for 3 to 5 days. We'll accept offers from Saturday to Sunday. We won't read any offers until Monday.
Delayed showings. Is that fair?
This might be off the beaten path, but just the annual rule of thumb of foreclosures.
Of what?
Foreclosures.
Foreclosures.
Negotiating with a bank.
Okay. Yes. Commission. Took a while for that one to come up.
Escalation clauses?
Yep. Okay. Any others?
I would say like pricing and condition of a seller's home.
It's sort of interesting to me that hasn't come up, that came up so late in here, but yes. Pricing the home. How about, do you feel that you're in any considerations for points when you're dealing with the offer with the buyer? What to offer? Okay? The offer price. Awesome. Okay, so things we're going to talk about today are some fundamentals and principles that I believe are key in negotiation and in closing, and they're similar things to me because it's really about getting people to yes, to where they feel great about the experience and that they are still in a place that someone's getting what they want, right? We're trying to get to a place of a win-win. And so some of the things that we're going to consider in this, and I believe so much of the negotiating process and helping your client get what they want is really about listening and questions. Assumptions drive me crazy. And someone will say, "Well, I didn't know you'd want to go to dinner with us." And it says, "Well, I can share with you one way you'd have found out." And then that kind of starts things off to a nice start. Sarcasm doesn't tend to get you too far in this department. And so I have to sometimes keep that at bay and recognize. I thought I was being funny. What happened? How did I lose you? So finding out their why, and that's really important, I think, at the strategic place in the beginning of all of this, is taking time to establish rapport and determine their why. And if any of you have been through the Jumpstart process and other courses, you've worked with this piece of finding your why and understanding really the core value in this, and that it's always more than about money. Got it? It's not about money. Who's been through the exercise of with Bobby, what would you pay more for that you could pay less? Yeah? So somebody share a few things about that have been through that. What would you pay more for that you could pay less?
Hair color.
Hair color, nice. Somebody wants their hair color. Deodorant. Coffee. Yeah. Healthy food. Anybody a 2-ply versus single-ply? All right, it's down to basics. Okay. Yeah, 3-ply. So, never can be too safe. I like it. You're worth it. You're worth it. And it works. All right. So everybody's different in these situations. You really have to recognize that personality and preference, all those things, are really important in understanding of what position and strategy that you might take with them. And you could do disc profiles and you can look at personality styles, but I think that there's questions that you could get into in the early stages of asking them, what's been your experience or process in working with other realtors? Have you ever bought or sold a home before? In working with other agents, what are some things that you could ask that may give you some insight into the agent? I will help you. So, I don't often lead with this, but many times when I start working with an agent, the first thing I will do is go to HomeSnap, and I will see how many transactions they've done in the last 24 months. It could be helpful, right? So it may give you some insight in the amount of grace and consideration that you and assistance you offer to this agent, and also maybe the one where they've sold 100 homes and everything's averaged at 900 and above, and you've sold 3, and your average price point has been $385. And so I think starting out the conversation with creating some common ground is really important in giving them perspective and understanding of where are we each coming from, so that we can have understanding of our experience levels and where we may need some coaching and guidance. Right? It doesn't necessarily mean that they're giving away or compromising their fiduciary responsibility to their client, rather giving them understanding of what your role and perspective is with your experience in the business. Also, how long have you been working with this client? Have you sold or bought a home with this client before? Most of the time, I hear people say, "Can you tell me a little bit about your client?" And and I kind of get quiet sometimes because I believe I know what they're asking for, but I come back to this piece about assumptions and what's really important. And we have to be, for those that have done this a while, I think we get a little more comfortable with what we should share and what we can't share. But it's really key in understanding asking more questions, right? That's just, you look at attorneys and people in that, the first one to speak loses, things like that. You know, so asking, well, what things are you interested in knowing? Okay? So it's really important in working with the clients first and foremost is understanding what your role is in the process and what you're here to do, right? So I use language like, I'm here to help you get to reach a goal, and I want to establish what those look like and how will you know when you won or when you had a great experience or when we've met your goal. Anybody else use different language in working with clients when some of those early meetings about establishing your goals or expectations? No? So I believe it starts really at the consultation. You know, so sometimes I use a document that goes through some of their favorites and things that they've the All About You form, right? And so it goes through things about their personality and you know, do they have dogs and kids and what do they love about their neighborhood and things like that, right? So those seem like the basics, but those are the keys to getting into the negotiation because those are the pieces that you're going to come back to beyond the money. Right? For some people, it becomes easy if they have to be in a house in 30 days and there's no other options. And so it's like there's a timeline and a deadline that creates the urgency that's going to make that a lot easier. But for people that aren't in that state of urgency, it's a lot easier to just, their motivation and their urgency isn't there. So I have to help remind them for all of our well-being that we are on a path to reach a goal. And the path that I'm going to take is determined upon what is your timeline, right? One of the first questions I ask people in an open house is, how soon will you be needing a home? Because it opens up a door of, do they even need a home, right? Or do, you know, it's really kind of leads them into that. What's important outside of price? So some of the things that I talk to and working with other agents, especially in situations where I'm competing with them in multiple offers, or delayed showings or anything like that, is I really try to dig into, and I have a series of questions, and I keep these things in Evernote, and I can even kind of click over and show you real quick. Look at that yard sale. Isn't it always fun to look at people's desktop when they show their screen on my ear? What I can see. So they have open. So I use Evernote, and this is just basically a place you can use notebooks and things like that, and I can search easily for any topics in here. So I'll have multiple offer. Well, that's nice. You want to show my screen?
Good looking mountain.
It's a good looking mountain. There we go. Yeah, that's me. Okay, so buyer offer checklist. These are things that I wanted to make sure I had in there. Offer questions, part 1, before writing an offer. Is that Elijah? Excuse me. I may have to come back to this. I don't want to delay it. I don't want to delay us here too much here. Here's one. So, great. Now this isn't very large. I'll kind of highlight some of these to you, but offer questions to the listing agent for offer. That's clear. I just try to use things that might remind me, and if you search multiple offer, it'll pull into here. But I've kind of distinguished them between multiple offers and what general questions I should be asking. But things such as, why are the sellers choosing to sell at this time? Can you share a list of improvements sellers made during the time of ownership? Update mechanicals since it was built. How many people are involved in the decision to sell? Are they in town and be able to make a decision within 24 hours? It's second nature to me because I've done it so many times that I know that's my next question. Are they in town and be able to make a decision within 24 hours? Let's see. Are you expecting multiple offers, or do you have multiple offers? Other than price, what's the most important to your seller? Any items in MLS that I should know are included and not remaining with the home. In multiple offers, I get into, do you have a deadline to receive all first offers and final offers? Is it determined if you will be accepting or countering one offer or calling for highest and best? And what assurance do I have that you're going to follow that procedure? Because I understand that it is your seller's right. Makes sense? It's completely the seller's right. So it's very frustrating in which they tell you it's going to be Sunday at 5. Oh, and you had submitted, and they said we accepted one. We went ahead and accepted Saturday because we got an acceptable offer. Well, how do we know that we couldn't have been acceptable? So it's really key to try to understand, how was the Sunday deadline identified? And was that something that you suggested or your seller? And I'll immediately get into my reasoning in the question as to, I would say, my reason is just to create understanding, because my buyers are very interested in this home. They want to make sure they don't lose this. So we want to make sure we have a chance to play at the dance. Are any of these offers from an unrepresented buyer? It's very important, folks. What happens if the buyer is unrepresented, another buyer, and you're in a multiple offer? Yes, T.
The listing agent gets paid more.
Potentially, the listing agent could be paid more.
Well, and that agent might be more inclined to share more information and help them out a better offer.
Yeah.
Right. All the things that we may have learned or understand or believe about fiduciary responsibility and compensation and representation are not the same thing, or it don't necessarily may not apply to that buyer's situation. Yes, Tony.
A lot of people have also said in there that my commission is not going to be 6% if I represent both sides. So if it's an unrepresented buyer, it may mean 10 grand more for my seller. So even though you might think, well, this guy is dealing for himself because he's going to get both sides of the transaction, a lot of times it's the seller that's going to win because he's going to pay less of a commission.
That's right. So it may be a situation where both parties could be winning in that situation, right, financially, in that the seller's going to pay less commission, the listing agent's going to make a little more commission, everybody wins. But again, what is it always not about? It's not always about money. It always is, but it really always isn't. Right? There's always something. Money can be just part of it, and that's part of your job, is to help both the buyer and understanding where the seller is in respect to those pivot points. Right? Very, very, very important. Also, I'll show you this last piece. I'm sorry, we're dealing with microphones here. Tell me. Have to. So I keep a document in here on contract language. And in here, I have lots of things regarding what some of my policies, practices, and stipulations are when I'm writing offers, and so that I have a quick reference to these things. And in there, it may be language I've used for due diligence, or commission is paid on sales price less the seller paid closing costs. That may be something that to consider, right? Some sellers, it's negligible, but if there's a couple $5,000 and they're paying 6% commission on that money that they're ultimately giving back to the buyer, that's a little something, right? So as you're negotiating in that piece, it can be something that you're offering that also helps ease that they may not even be considering as a financial point. Make sense? For builders, reps, things like that, and then I have also things to consider when submitting an offer, especially a multiple offer. Cover letter, explain flexibility with close date. Ask to submit in person. Why? Well, I have some personal information from the buyer they would like to share and a chance to pitch your offer. That would be greatly appreciated. I'll only take no more than 6 to 7 minutes. Yes?
I'm sorry, let's go back.
Yeah.
Your net commission, are you talking about both sides? How do you present that to the buy side? in front of.
If you represent the listing side, I ask them just directly. I don't feel like, I feel comfortable that that isn't me asking to reduce their commission, just are they willing to not get paid commission on the seller concession? Yeah. Reviews with listing agents, possible video on YouTube, personal letter from the buyer. I think it's statement of reasonable expectation for repairs. Nothing that will be requested is not mechanical, structural, or termite related. Another way to try to position yourself in negotiating. Now we're getting into some of the weeds of it, which I do want to cover some practical application to all this, because there's concepts to this and then there's application, and I think they each bear witness to the importance of this. Pre-approval letters, obviously a call from the lender is very, very helpful. That the lender personally call and send an email or leave a message that I've worked with this buyer before, they are in great shape. I mean, really the conversation means so much more than the paper. Offer for seller occupancy post-close for a few days. So to make this easier on the move, would it be helpful if we gave you a couple days to move out? Not my favorite to do, the seller living in the home that your buyer owns, but I think it's very, it can be influential and another piece of where the seller may not have considered the implications of selling and buying on the same day, or having all their stuff out on the day of closing, prior to closing. There's so much risk in that for the seller. I mean, really, the truck is packed, their life is going forth, and thankfully with the 3-day notification, but stuff can still happen, right? Anybody had one where it blew up on the day of closing? Not blowing you. Yes?
2 days before.
2 days before. What did you do?
It was, we were contingent upon sale, the one we were buying, the buyers buying our house was contingent, their lender forgot to give the disclosure, so it was the whole trickle effect down. They ended up, those buyers, I think their lender actually had to pay about $1,000 to move closing. Thankfully, we only had to move it just 2 business days. It all trickled down to those buyers and that lender.
Yep. And so, when I'm talking about, when I'm looking at these pieces for negotiation and looking at what are areas, understand all the pitfalls that are possible in the transaction. And if you're unsure about those, or you feel uncomfortable about these areas, my biggest belief is just to be prepared. And so that's why I don't trust myself enough to remember some of the best practices that I've learned from other people, or tips, or language. I mean, I'm not that bright. And I just feel that that's my responsibility. As soon as I learn things, I just open this up and I add to, escalation clauses down here. And I put in here, Sarah Michaels used this, or where did I put, this is one I thought was really interesting. Buyer agrees to pay $1,000 above the net purchase price after concessions of the highest and best competing offer up to a purchase price of $330. Buyer has the right to ratify a blind contract upon seller sharing copy of signed competing offer and seller accepting our offer as highest and best. Lots of language, lots of complexities to that. Before you get into escalation clauses, please ask the seller, the listing agent, are you familiar with escalation clauses, and have you discussed this with your seller? Many are not. And it can make them uncomfortable, and the seller can feel like this is a bit of a shell game. And maybe it's unfair. And maybe it's just, it's a yucky practice, right? So you want to get them more comfortable with what the escalation clause looks like, and how do you win against an escalation clause? Does anybody have any suggestions on this? What's that?
What you asked about, or I've seen somewhere you offer a dollar amount above the.
Yep.
You should have your own escalation.
Dollar amount over.
Right.
What do you pick?
Not in.
How much?
500 to exceed the.
What's that?
500.
$500 over highest and best?
But not
Up
to.
to. Up to?
Yeah.
A lot more
To the,
Yep, that the buyers accept them for. So I want to play through a scenario, because this to me is one of the, I think is a little strategic. So let's say the house is priced at $475. Or that listing agent really did my favorite, they priced it at $479. That's my favorite. Why do I hate this price? Why do I hate that price?
Because people talking about it 475 want to see it, or?
Yeah. When somebody's budget been 480 that you've worked with, right? You've got to play the system, and the system is all about searchability and database. So it's simply it's a math problem. So let's say the price is $479, and you find because your buyer's budget was up to $500, and you're going to offer what over this price up to? What would you suggest as an open situation to the buyer of a suggestion that could be favorable to them to win? Notice my language in that. Very, very intentional that you're kind of managing the expectations of them. Could be favorable to be accepted. What seems reasonable to you?
More than that.
Yeah, I would say at least 1%, but then it doesn't go above that.
Okay.
You know, say, and get it to be an odd number, on an even number, because everybody else is, instead of 500, if it's only 500, which won't be enough. But like, if it's 5,000, get it to be 5,700 or something like that.
Yeah.
If everybody else is doing 500.
Right, because everybody else is likely going to do 5,000. Is 5,250 enough? I don't know. I mean, it's always more than price, so I've got to get to what are the other terms, and that to me is a big part of negotiation and closing is building trust and relationship. And that's why it is so crucial that you participate in the activities beyond your brokerage, because you're going to be working with these people, and how you begin the conversation with them conversationally. So I think anytime you call someone, the first thing is, did I catch you at a good time? It's so rhetorical to me, because what I would say is, I answered. But nobody loves that response. So yeah, it's a great time. Do you have 2 minutes? I have a few questions about the offer. If not, what would be a great time for me to call? Already they can see you can respect their time and trying to schedule that. I don't think text is always the way. I don't think text works super well in negotiations at all. There's just no emotion to it, and this is a very emotional process. Do you understand what we're saying here about escalation clauses? Okay? Pick a number, not just in the amount of the increase, but pick a number up to that would not be in 479. I wouldn't pick 485. Right? Pick an odd number. 486. 486, 500. Who said that? With. Alright. It's good. No, Whit gets to work with me, and so we talk about these things. In multiple offers, and using escalation clauses for that. Questions, comments? Okay. Let's go back to.
Did you add anything to it about not to exceed or something about the appraisal price? Like what it's on appraised for? You don't want to go above that.
Yeah, so the appraised price, as far as it meeting
You
this.
don't want, you want to make sure that it doesn't go above and beyond, like at 486, what if it only appraises for 480?
Right, it appraised for the list price, but it didn't appraise for the escalation price.
Yeah.
And so that would be another place in which you could position your offer to win, because you have mitigated the appraisal potential problem. Again, being prepared with what does that look like, and educating your buyer on that, because that can get a little more complicated. When do you feel is a good time to start talking about escalation clauses with a buyer? Yep. So offer, I really like it at consultation. Describing the market they're in or we are in and what we're going to potentially experience. So that consultation many times is an hour to 2 hours, and it can be overwhelming, but I would include potentially a page in your presentation about multiple offers and being competitive. So it's not if, it's when we're going to find a house. And we need to be prepared with these things so we can efficiently and swiftly work through that process to explain that to them. Same thing goes with seller paid closing costs. right? Have knowledge and understanding about seller paid closing costs, and what does that really mean? It's not seller paid, right? They could get the house for $480, but they're asking the seller to pay $485. We're gonna pay, we're offering $485 with the seller paying $5,000. Don't send me a full price offer and say it's full price, and you offer $5,000 off the price. It's not a full price offer, and that language can be very infuriating to your seller. So I may buffer that. We share that with them. They're taking that place. Make sense? Okay.
Dad, I have a question.
Yes, please.
If you, I was in a multiple offer thing a month ago, and I was asking different agents before I submitted mine. And someone suggested offering like a certain amount and over the purchase price and banking on the appraisal. What are your thoughts on that? If you were to go like 15 or 20 over and just pray that it doesn't appraise, and then you have to go back and negotiate.
I think I remember talking about that.
Yeah.
And the buyer may hear that, right? They've got friends that have bought and sold, and somebody's picked some great strategy to win, or they found an off-market property, and how come you didn't find one of those? I get back into, I always try to go back to where are we each coming from as far as agents, and what relationship do you have with your seller? So have you had any experiences where an appraisal didn't come into value, and how did you handle that? Start with the question rather than starting with, well, that's gonna be a problem, and have you considered that? Right? So I want to understand what's their experience with that, because it can be a very difficult process to navigate or circumvent with very little success. So understanding with them, become a team. This is a team process to get to a finish line. And it doesn't work without everybody working together to get there. And everybody's got to give to get. And again, that to me starts at the consultation. It may seem very basic, it may seem obvious or clear, but the problem is everything's out the window when the emotions get to that level. This is in the top 5 stressors in their life. And so rational thinking and logic and reasonability are some of the first things to go. Yeah? So it's important that we cover those things at the consultation so that we can come back to reminding them on what the key points were. What were the pivot points that made this important, right? So we talked about occupancy. I talk about getting the buyer's rep signed. We didn't hear that come up here, but I really refer to this is as much about me hiring you as you hiring me. That this is a contract of fiduciary responsibility, and it's my commitment to you that I will be loyal to you above all others. And I think that it's something that too is to be clear about is that you have to go back here. Yep. Is that I just lost my train of thought. Where did it go? No, you're fine. You hire me, I hire you. This point to me, it kind of helps resolve some of the buyer's rep stuff, is I am obligated legally to present coming soons to clients that have a written loyalty agreement with me versus the ones that don't. And so and I sometimes use that. This is a buyer's representation agreement, but I'll tell you, for me, this really is a loyalty agreement. And it's very important is that it's not as much of time you to me as me to you. And so that I can share those things to you. If I'm sharing things with you and not in an agency relationship that I could with others, then I'm out of integrity with that. So they tend to get that one. Yes?
With that, how do you handle having buyers basically buyers are looking for the same things that are both in their contract, and you're reading the buyer's rep agreement, and then I may show this house to other people. You send them to at the same time, or
Right. I explained to them in the consultation that while it's rare, and it's somewhat surprising that it's rare, that I don't have typically the same people searching for the same thing. And even if they are, when it comes to price, bedroom count, and zip code, that there's different things that are important to them. But understand that the clients that I work with, all the access is there for everybody to see. And as they want to see it, sometimes time is of the essence. And so I assure you, you will be given all the the professionalism and the ability possible to get you in when you request and to write the offer as soon as you request, and we'll do it with integrity. But have I had people, I have had 2 buyers under agency agreements that wanted to write an offer on the same house, and that is messy. It can be challenging, right? Who signed the buyer's rep first? Okay. Yes.
Can you give us a quick summary? Because I've never had that happen. Like, can you give us a short story of how that played out?
Yeah, and I love that you asked, because it's not if, it's when, folks. Like, that is to me the nature of this business. It's just like life, right? It's not if, it's when. It's happening. Christmas is coming. You know, look busy. So, what I did is, I can think of one instance where I brought in Jamie Helms, and I respectfully asked one buyer that I didn't have as strong of a relationship with, but I made it very clear and transparent to both parties that I have 2 people that are not only interested in this house, but they want to write offers on this home. And I explained it to the listing agent and the buyer, and I assured them of the credibility and credentials of Jamie, and that we would keep that separate, but it works very well. I think Jamie won. But again, it was a part of their offer, but it's uncomfortable. I mean, you know, I put some intentional division between that relationship once that process started. And so I didn't call that buyer and give them a high five, like, hey, you wanted me to, type of thing.
Did you tell them that they lost and you wanted to keep the other one instead? The other buyer that you retained agency with?
I cleaned that up before we got into the offer process, so then Jeannie took them from there. Is that what you're asking?
Kind of, yeah, just telling them that I'm going to give you, I have 2 people wanting to write a contract, and I like these people better, so you're going to Jamie.
It may have not been what we said, but yeah, something like that happened. I'm going to give you the pain in the asses first. And then if they don't buy that house, that the relationship would come back to me. Yes?
Did you, in that situation, give consideration to yes or no, why or why not, to say, getting Jamie and somebody else and treating both parties equally? Like, hey, I love you both. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to advise these 2 trusted people so I don't have to choose. And I'm going to do the very best I can for both of you by supporting this person.
I love that.
And then if it doesn't, you know, if that doesn't, and we're looking at other houses,
Yeah.
then I'll step back in, but I want to treat that will be fairly to honor my fiduciary responsibility.
I like that even better. I was too worried about money. It's inherent and part of what we do, and you know, it's the best thing you can do is get that out of your head, and the quickest way to do that is do enough business to where your business isn't dependent upon this closing, so that you can in great faith tell them, I have a strong, consistent business that's not dependent on you buying this home, so I don't want you to feel that this is driven with any of that consideration. It's just not the mindset by which I come from. I understand I get paid on closings, but it's not the mindset in which I serve. The language and pieces to this, to me, and so much of negotiating and getting to closing is about relationship building. There's nuances and things that I do, and there's a lot of signals and cues that I'm looking for, especially when showing property or on the phone. But as much of it is about relationship building, that so we have a lot of trust and respect and understanding about that there's just not some personal financial gain to that, and then I'm kind of reminding them about those things. Let's see, sorry. Okay. We talked a little bit about this, but to me it's about being prepared and having the game plan before it starts. Getting the information. I keep notes in Evernote as well when I work with buyers, and so I have buyer notes, and then I have one with their name. And then within there, I have their key points, and they're all about you, and or their position points. And the same thing with sellers. And then when they go to make an offer, of course, I'm going to put the address in there, the agent's name, and I'm going to write a little bit about what I learned on that call, be it with the agent or about the seller, that could help me in those situations. So be the expert in that area. The only way that I knew to do that was to try to copy things that other people were doing that I learned and saw were working. So anytime that you lose in a multiple offer situation, it would be an opportunity to find out why and how the other person succeeded, and explain to them, I'm always interested in ways in which to develop better strategies for this. Are there things that they Is there anything that they did besides price that influenced your seller? No question?
Well, I did have a question. When you convey information to the listing agent about your client, when you're,
Yes.
presenting them,
Yes.
I've always struggled a little bit on confidentiality.
Yep.
You,
It is what I feel can be gray, right? Because there's a section in the buyer's rep that talks about confidentiality, and I explain that to them within their criteria considerations that, what we talk about here today won't be shared unless there's anything with your permission that you feel comfortable with me sharing. So I'd like to talk today about the offer process and what things I may share that you feel comfortable with. So some of it may be, what is your reason for moving? What is your motivation? What is your timing? Some people in certain zip codes, they want to know if they have kids for the neighbors. Are they going to replace the neighborhood kid? And do they have dogs that bark and all those kind of silly things? Or what do they do? They work. I don't know. I mean, they qualify. That's what I know. They're ready to write an offer. Is that good enough? Again, those tactics and language don't get me very far. And so, from experience, I try to find creative and complementary ways in which I ask those questions. I really don't. I hate the question, tell me about your buyer. Have questions that you feel are appropriate to the transaction about that. Yes?
Do you feel as a buyer, Jason, that it's beneficiary to your offer to go into details about your client? Even if not asked?
I do, because I believe it can get us to a more humanistic place as to who's buying. I like the letter the best from the buyer. I like the letter the best. I have templates of that, and really they're just samples from other people that gave me permission to share that, to let your buyer be a little more at ease with the process and what was shared. Right? So then it kind of gives them, I can share some of the basics, but I will also address things that the buyer appreciated about their home that likely the seller made an improvement to. Oh my God, they love pink carpet too. That's crazy. So I think that can help you. Answer your question? Yep. Okay. You got to be confident about it, and I think not try to bulldog the situation. All of it came down to questions we talk about assuming. They're all different. So what resources do you have? Like I said, one of the things that I use is Evernote. I have sample contracts. I have those sample letters. What are things that we can provide to these people that will help them feel more comfortable with the process? Have explanations about escalation clauses and seller paid closing costs, delayed occupancy agreements. What does that look like and mean? What is the risk to them for that? Who pays rent during that time? Who covers insurance? All those things to help ease them through that. Okay? New construction. I want to talk about new construction a bit. Who has sold new construction in here? All right. Anybody that's had some experience in feeling that they were told there's no negotiation and you found ways in which to work through some points to that? Does anybody have experience with that? Yes.
Sometimes it's like a closing date or something the seller really cares about, or
Yep.
throwing in appliances or fence or sod or whatever,
Right.
rather than dropping the price and that's another cost.
Yes. It's very important to a builder to maintain comps, especially if they have other things on the market. And explain that or offer that right at the beginning. I understand it's in the best interest of the buyer as well. But the buyers often forget that. So concessions and considerations are really helpful in helping keep the comps up in the neighborhood rather than getting a super deal off the price. Yes. Sod, I love that. Fences, blinds. Don't forget blinds. That seems to be a big one. Everybody they're so concerned about the other things. It's really important for day one. A nice closing gift too, those little accordion blinds. Yes. What else? Yes.
Putting appliances, landscaping, fencing, window screens.
Window screens.
What else? Yeah, closing date, that's
Mhm.
great, but, what else?
And explain again in the consultation to the buyers of what sort of restrictions could exist in the new construction scenario, right? It's not just sometimes like getting the floor mats done at the car dealer, the free oil changes. There's going to be things to this process and understanding what that looks like. Maybe this builder consideration, could you tell me about your walkthrough procedure and your warranty? So some builders will call the buyer at 11 months and offer to come back and do the work. Very impressive. Maybe not customary for people, but could be a point that you write in that would make them feel more comfortable, and you can explain to the buyer why that's so beneficial. Make sense? Yes?
Do folks ever pay for like HOA fees for
Absolutely.
a while?
Absolutely. Yes, front-loaded HOA fees is a great one, especially like in condos. Yes?
What about title expenses? Typically, builder doesn't, buyer does, but that would keep them on the.
Absolutely. Yes, title expenses. So doesn't affect price, doesn't affect MLS, but most of the time in new construction in Davidson County, it's customary, again, choosing language appropriately, seller always pays closing costs. No, they do not. The word always almost shouldn't be anywhere, right? I love this guy at Home Depot says, anytime somebody says, oh, I just need a light bulb, it's standard size, he goes, I just grab the first one there and say, there it is. It's just standard size. I realized it once when that must be the most annoying thing that they get. It's just standard. Like, what's the standard size? It's a standard window size. I need a screen. Okay, I got that one. So that it's customary. So asking that the seller participate in title, and that you may close at the same place. Right? Why is it beneficial or potential benefit to close at the same place? What's that? Key swap makes it easier with that. Others?
Sometimes it saves money.
Yes. Why could it save money?
People are doing both jobs and they, discount bulk.
Yes. So a discount could be available. So title companies, if you're not clear about how they make money, is off writing the title insurance policy. It's not the $500 attorney closing fee. Okay, so they underwrite the issues that come up. I know of situations where Rudy Title and other escrow companies, they've written checks $80,000, $150,000 to cover claims against those issues, and if they escalate to a certain area, then the underwriter can kick in. But the deductibles are high, and it's insurance. That's what it is. So yes, there can be some discounts on what you'll hear sometimes called simultaneous issue. Ah. Others? Cool. Okay. And that could play into a negotiation on resale as well. How hell-bent are you on closing at your title company versus both? I think there's certainly benefit to each party having their own side of the equation, but in new construction, many times, understand those variables going into it, that may be important to the seller because the seller is getting a break on that. And the same could be true when the needle gets close. Many times people, all they want to do is feel like they're the last one not to say yes. Make sense? They took our counter. Mm-hmm. Oh, we got an extra, whatever it is. That may be some of those little extras. But I always think you have to bring it back to the place, or not always, but I think that a lot of people want to understand, what does it look like when it comes down to money? So buying versus renting, what does that really mean? So you've got considerations that it's a write-off on your taxes. What does that really mean? Right? You get to write off your interest. I don't know what the hell that means. If your payment's $1,000 and your interest is $800 times 12, right? What is that? 8 times 12? How much?
96.
Thank you. 9,600, and your income's 50,000, right? Instead of paying tax on this at 30%, we're going to reduce this 3,400. Is that right? No.
40,400.
Thank you. 44. That's fine.
40,400.
Right.
40.
Okay. So now this is your taxable income, and I can show them really that's what's saving in your pocket. Like that's real money. It's not like funny money or Disney dollars. Like that's real money. And that tends to have leverage with them. Questions, comments? Okay. Competition. We talked about that with multiple offers and other agents. and I think building relationships with that. I also play that into issues with delayed showings. And could you tell me about what the interest was in delaying the showings and recognize my buyers may only be in town for a couple of days or today? Is there any chance, we don't care if the seller leaves or what the condition of the home is. My buyer really understands what they want, and they're not interested or concerned about condition or what it looks like. We're not trying to get an unfair advantage. They just want to get in and take a look real quick. Would that be possible? So offering those other things and preparing your buyer like that may be the situation. Okay. In this, is there any way that you could go in and do a preview versus the buyer going? Right? Could I do a video tour of the home because they're not available to show this? Anybody other have other experiences in delayed showings and feeling like you're creating advantage there? Or positioning with your buyer? Or ideas? Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. But preparing, I think part of this is also understanding what's the strategy for the seller in this or the listing agent. So I may say, I get it, it's cool, you're delaying showings, I see your first ones on Saturday, you're accepting offers on Monday, if you get offers. Is your plan firm in that and that you're going to be accepting offers on Monday? Or if somebody came in on that first day and got the right offer, do you feel like your sellers would take it? Or are they in a position where they've been through this experience before? Are you advising them on this? Is that something you've had great experience with? Bring it back around as to what's their experience with this. How did that go well? How did that not go well? What's your experience with escalation clauses? And and try to learn from them. And then when you get offers on your listing, certainly looking at language that people are using of things that you found were great or interesting or beneficial. What was their process? What things did they send over? And then I put that into my checklist of things that I want to do to make sure I'm representing my buyer. I also get into features and benefits. So, of course, when you're selling homes, it's really about that. I don't walk through the home and talk about here's the crown molding and this has got granite countertops and things like that. I try to point out things that they may not understand or consider. So I might be looking behind the toilets or under the cabinets, and I see that they've got braided lines versus rubber hoses, right? Just things that may break less. Or I notice that they've got their splash blocks put properly, or they've got the downspouts. It drains away from the home versus just there's downspouts draining there, meaning it's trenched under the home. Understanding benefits of construction and things that are going to benefit homeownership are really important, right? Aggregate and how water seepage and all those sort of things. You just get into inspections and you can start seeing like things that they're not looking at because they're really just looking at, does this thing look good or not? Like, can we move into this thing? Is it move-in ready? It's got a 3-car garage. Like, once you get past that, what are some of the other things that are going to tip that over that they need to remember? So I can come back to that when we get into negotiation on price. Make sense? Being in a hurry creates errors and tension. I think that everybody senses that. And so the patience, a lot of times there isn't time. Creating that patience at the front end is important, or taking taking the time in the front end when you have more time to explain that to them is very, very important. I think that they feel that tension of and anxiety around what is happening, when that's happened. So looking at or what to every condition and clause, just always make sure you're covering the or what. Like if this doesn't happen, or what? Buyer to provide, seller to leave the swing set at no charge to the buyer, or the refrigerator. That fridge may get moved. What is going to happen there? So be prepared for what could be negotiating points on that. And having your positions thought out and written out, like I said, I always like to kind of script it out so that I'm not left in a position where I'm trying to figure it out, right? Because I find that that's the time when I'm under the gun and they can kind of sense that. And so, I mean, when I'm saying, are you trying to win or close, that's not language I would certainly use with them, but I would try to remind them about the considerations of not closing. Right, so I had a seller, a buyer recently. There was a house around the corner for sale. We have a contract on this. We go through inspection. We're literally down to $250 a part to make this work. And sometimes it may be an inclination for you to pay that or to bring the deal together. It's what it's going to take, or the agent's going to ask you to bring that together. And to me, that comes back to being prepared and clear in what your role and representation in your policies are with that. And so, coming into commission of what is your commission, I think that being clear about it and less explanatory, it can be better if you've already outlined what services you offer for the value that the value of your exchange. So my fee for service, a lot of people like language that's not commission. Commission, I think, has some negative connotation to it, as though, like, I sell you, I get paid. And that's not what I'm doing. I'm helping you reach goals and results. I'm not getting paid to sell you anything. Like, if anything, I want to be your realtor for life, and I'm not interested in you just, buying or selling one home with me. So I know that I don't like to be sold. I want somebody that provides value to a transaction. And so that's what I want to be to you. And the more that I understand the anxiety or apprehension or needs through this process, the better that I can serve you. So having those resources available, I think, is super important as far as moving concierges and great inspector choices and great on solutions. And you have all these things accessible through the various Facebook groups where you can get them. Do not wait until you need one to start assembling the list. It's not if, it's when, right? So have a list of all the people that you could possibly think that someone may need through those situations and scenarios, right? Same thing on retainer fee. Have a clear explanation as to what that fee is for and what it's about. I don't suggest just blaming on the broker and saying, oh, that's just the fee that they charge that we're a part of it. It's just part of the cost of doing business. It doesn't resonate for me. If it doesn't feel good for you, the likelihood is to feel good for them. Does anybody have any additional? I'd love to hear any position points regarding commission or retainer fees that when people say someone else is going to charge this, or would you work for 5.5? Yes.
I didn't come up with this. Greg Faricelli once said is, and I remember coming with the commission thing, said this isn't a fee or cost, this is an investment in the process of getting you into the home you need. And it's going to involve this and this and this and all these services I provide, but it's an investment, not a cost.
It's an investment in the process. The fee is an investment in the process.
Seems to be working.
Yes, awesome. Yes, others.
On some higher dollar listings, I've had to, on the retainer thing, I've just plainly explained that, I'm going to actually spend money and energy and time now, although, we hope to figure out the closers. No, it's not guaranteed. We will actually close, things come up. So, I'm spending money ahead of time, and so I asked for them to cover whatever the dollar amount I decided, at the time. It's usually a percentage of, what we're going to list for.
Okay.
So most of the time they'll be understanding of that, is that when they realize that I'm actually spending cash now up front, so this helps us be together in this,
It's one of the few businesses where we get paid on speculation, right? Versus like our retainers for attorneys when some work in those. But those are big dollar reward cases, and it's typically not the only case. You can't, keep the lights on at home with that, so you gotta have everything supported.
For a listing, I always tell them that the retainer is pays a portion of the marketing.
Yep.
And that it's my investment in the property, and that we intend to market the property in such a way that it will sell.
Yep.
Always hate it, when you get down to the point it's not selling, you think you're going to lose that money. And then on the buy side, I call it a cost pass-through.
Cost pass-through. Yeah.
Not to, but that's
I'm
what I
not
tell them.
saying-
I just say, it's a fee that is, it's a processing fee, and I just.
Yep. I think you can position it in the buy side as well. Many times people, I can tell you, there's brokers that have offices maybe across the street, and they charge a much higher fee for buyers versus sellers because the buyers aren't paying the commission. Are the buyers paying the commission? Yes, they're paying all of the commission. There's no commission being paid unless the buyers bring the money to the table to buy the house.
Yeah.
Right? But they, they feel there is an investment, right? You're driving them around and taking time to do comps and all of these things, and so this is a cost of fee for service that's a part of the package and the investment that I'm providing on the front end. Okay? And, you know, I've seen other tricks with this that I don't love. I mean, some people, one I think is funny is in the blank, if you're going to write it out, you could put 5, 6, and 7, or you could put 6, 7, and 8. You don't let them pick. And the one that they pick the most statistically is this. They pick what's in the middle. It's not like gas. They feel uncomfortable to be a low tipper. So that could be your strategy. Okay, Open Door Corporate Beasts. It's working with foreclosures, REOs, and negotiating with that. Who's had experience with this, and how have you found advantage or detriment in working with them? Yes.
The Open Door, it is about price. It is about price. It's only about price.
Okay.
So they have their, you know, with the number that they need, and
Yep.
and none of the other stuff is negotiable. It's not. There's not a total value proposition like you're talking here with different pieces of value. It's just that. And I did a horrible job with it, so I'm not going to advise you on that. So.
Well, I don't know. Did it close?
It did.
Oh, I find that to be a great success.
It closed 2 weeks later.
Yeah, but it would, I can assure you, because I was kind of a side part of that, it would not have closed with most agents involved. And beyond just it being an experienced position was the commitment to the process and the close. A lot more time, a lot more money, a lot more learning curve in that. Now, in the negotiation of inspections and items like that, did you find any variable in that? Because I know that was part of the issue.
I didn't.
Did they give on, they did an allowance, didn't they?
You put money in escrow for repairs that were agreed to.
Because the buyer needed the money to make the repairs, correct?
No, Open Door would not give them money. Open Door was going to do the repairs, but they didn't do the repairs. So at the last minute, we had to put money in escrow in order to cause it to close. And the only X factor that we got was I actually got a person the day that it was supposed to close. It was a human being and pushed to get it to close.
Yeah.
So.
And looking at trying to find that adversary within the company, when we were doing short sales back in the market crash in 09-10, trying to get to that person that you could work with to build some relationship, explaining to them the situation of your buyer and that their needs. Like, this is a real human that doesn't have a roof over their head, or they're buying their first home, and this is a new process to them. And while I'm comfortable with it, this concept is different too, and I understand you've got certain metrics and things that you need to meet, but understand that this is important. And also in negotiation, make sure you're in inspection negotiation that you're being sensitive to the buyer's needs of, do they have cash out of pocket, right? So be really considerate of the process in what their cash position is, and I believe, again, that's a consultation discussion as to beyond just the financing of do they qualify, but what sort of expenses and considerations could you be mindful to after the closing? Make sense? Okay. So I don't love, there's some books in here that I'm going to share with you, and I don't really like splitting the difference as a means of negotiation, but some people do, and be mindful of that that's how they know how to negotiate, is that split the difference. And so if we just get to the middle, like, that's win-win. Everybody gave a little bit, and they won. And know that buyers, many times, that's all the negotiating skills that they understand or see. And so they believe going very high might result them to something more favorable than had they gone low or realistic. And so the language that I use is we're going to try to strike a number that's aggressive but shy of offensive. And the way, and I use that language very often, and the way that I do that is learning from the seller and the listing agent, trying to get insight as to what that could be. Because any of it could be perceived as offensive, but it's not meant to be, and so we need to understand that. I believe, I'm going to give you a handout here, maybe a couple more copies here, but negotiating and bargaining very, very different things here, and thank you. Awesome, thank you. And so this will kind of explain a little bit of the difference to that and have some tips. This was some resources that were provided to me by a professor at Clemson, sorry for them, that he teaches classes on negotiation and bargaining and the difference in that and trying to get to yes. And ultimately, what I find is understanding the facts, the pivot points, the stress points, and building relationship. I think that it's something that you need to put practice to. I think it goes with all aspects of our business, that it can't benefit you enough to do scripting and role play with your peers and with yourself. Record yourself and play at that and see, does this sound natural? If somebody asked me this question and I responded, it's going to be a lot more nervous when you're sitting in front of them, they ask it live. So at the very least, you should be comfortable with listening to what it sounds like on the phone and understanding what alternatives you have as far as for the counter. So many times looking at the package of what it is and making it clear about what these points are or what's important to someone. And don't be afraid to put those things in a written form to someone that these are points that are really important to my buyer, and these are places where we have flexibility and negotiation. Do not assume or understand that listing agent has any memory of the phone call or text that you sent once they actually call their seller and they're telling them about your offer. If they even do that. Because really what they did is they forwarded the emails, they may have had a phone call about it, and the seller texted what they want to counter with, and they hate the offer, and that's kind of how it goes. So try to encourage them to have that conversation and understanding that. Here's some great books on negotiation. So some of these get well beyond just dealing with, certainly with real estate. It could help in your marriage or your relationships with friends and others and creating boundaries. I think all those things are very, very important. And like I said, I think without the plan, it's very challenging to guarantee success in this area. So plan in advance and understand that to me is the key in addition to building relationships. So, any questions? Yes?
Can you slide it back to the reading? Thank you.
Yes, I will leave that up and you can look at that and any other resources that you have or experience. I'd love to hear that. Yes?
Will we have access to these slides?
You will, yes. We will share the slides. We will share the slides as well. Anything else we didn't cover here? Delay insurance foreclosures, pre-market, competing with other agents. I think we hit all of it. Pricing the home, I think we talked about that. Strategy. That's where I get into strategy. And we talked about how did you arrive at the price of your home. So typically before you go on the listing presentation, I would ask them, what do you expect to sell your home for? And how did you arrive at that price? I've seen other strategies where you take that seller to tour other homes that are comparables to theirs at that price point. That's a winner. If you're having challenge or struggle in that area, that can certainly be a way to help them level the field of what's realistic here. Looking at the other homes versus just, we saw the pictures and we have part of it for us. Cool? All right, 10 minutes negotiating. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate it.